Welcome to Keough's Corner. Uh, love doing these shows, these programs with our students from Dover Sherburne and Mr. Sweeney's TV production show class. And happy to be here today with Lori and Alex. By the way, what grade are you guys?
We are sophomores.
Sophomores. Excellent. Okay, so you have a series of questions for me, which is great. And I'm ready when you are. Who will be first?
I'm going to start us off. So the first question we have is that the pandemic has brought us together as a community like never before. In what ways do you think DS has grown stronger this year?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Lori. You know, being kind of in the front line of the decisions, I can see a lot of the unfortunate stuff. You know, the fact that you guys haven't been in every day, and the fact that you haven't been able to have those social experiences. Just the little things mean so much. You realize when we're in this situation where we're all coming from our homes half the time. But I do think that for us as a community, we have come to realize some things like what's most important. For example, I don't think we would have ever come to consensus about the schedule that you guys are working on with the longer blocks. I think that would have just been resisted, and we just could never have done that. And we've learned that, wow, we can do something like that and do it differently. And it doesn't mean that that's the schedule that would stick with the longer blocks, but what it does mean is that we can do that. The other thing that I think that's been a real positive out of this is that I truly believe that the kids are being thoughtful about what they're doing outside of school. And that matters, right? Every week I hear of a school that shuts down because of you know, parties on the weekend, kids being kind of careless with masks, and we're not immune. We've had those situations, and that's, you know, that's to be expected. But I think in the big picture, I really do think the kids they're carrying their weight, because at the end of the day, we can't chase kids around. You know, we can't follow you guys around when you're outside of school. And I understand that kids will be kids, but I also think that the kids have demonstrated their concern for other people, right? Because it's not so much that we're concerned about kids giving it to kids, because the dangers aren't as serious. But if kids are reckless, that could spread into my household. For example, my mother's 86 years old and living here in Sherburne. So if people are being reckless, you know, that hurts me directly. So I think that as a community, we've been a lot more thoughtful, and I appreciate that. I think that we kind of needed a reset in that way, and it's been good.
All right, thank you. Next question is, how does the school deal with contact tracing and telling someone they're a close contact while maintaining patient confidentiality?
Yeah, so that's a really hard thing to do, right? We're a small system. If we make an announcement that um, you know, there was a teacher who is sick with the coronavirus, and say it's at Pine Hill School, and then everyone's there except for one teacher, it's pretty hard to protect that person's confidentiality. And the same holds true for the contact tracing. If you want to speak with 5 people about where they've been in the past, you know, 48 hours, and those 5 people come from one class, and somebody's going to be out in that class or has been out, it's pretty easy to identify who these people are. So the fact that we're small makes it really hard. But I think our nurses have tried to be really thoughtful and responsible about that. As a case in point, they won't tell me the names of who's sick. They won't tell me. They'll tell, because I'm the one who generates the letter home, right? But they'll tell me we have you know, a 10th grade student, and I don't have to write 10th grade student, but I'll just say a student at the high school has contracted coronavirus, and um, just letting you know the person was in school. Therefore, we have to do this contact tracing. And if you haven't been notified, it means you weren't a close contact. So we try to keep our cards pretty close to the vest. And I think we've done a pretty decent job. What do you think, Alex? And do you feel like, um, I mean, we're so small, and this, kids talk, so they must know when kids are being contact traced. But I haven't heard that. What do you think?
I mean, I definitely know of one person just because um, I was in the vicinity. I was in the close vicinity. Um, so I heard that going around, but as far as I know, it's just the one person.
Yeah, so well, that's good. And there have been a lot more. So the fact that you don't know is a good sign. How about you, Lori?
Yeah, I feel like it's been pretty good. I don't really know. I know of like, I think I've heard of two, maybe one
Hmm.
situation where kids were contact traced, and I think that was it. I haven't really heard too much about it.
Yeah, you think about it. Back to your question, Laurie, about how has it made us grow as a community? There really is like a social contract in all this, right? I mean, we can't make people be decent. We can't make people respect people's privacy. How do you do that? If you turn your back and they want to chirp about all the people they know who've gotten sick or who may have been exposed, it's kind of dirty. And um, and I'm sure there are people who do it, but I think as a whole, we found out that we're a pretty respectful place, and that means a lot to me. It's always meant a lot to me. I don't want to be in charge of a school or a school system where people are not decent to each other. That just turns me off. I think that it's not a big ask for people to just basically exhibit common courtesy, and I think we've seen a lot of that. So I appreciate that.
Yes, definitely. Next question is, are you looking to eliminate at-home Wednesdays and add a full school day instead?
So here's you're getting it right from the horse's mouth. I mean, I'm the one who's heavily involved in making those decisions about when we return or how we go about increasing. Um, right now, the high school is the last on the list. I think if we're going to increase in-person learning, it will take place at the middle school first, and just as we went K3 first, then we went 4, 5, and I suspect we'll go either 6 or 6 and 7 or 6, 7 and 8. But that's the next, and that's actually what we're talking about now. And then for the high school, I suspect we would do the same thing. Then we'll perhaps simultaneously be looking at adding Wednesdays back at the elementary levels, because really the Wednesdays at the elementary levels were originally intended for keeping those two cohorts apart, right? The Monday, Tuesday, and the Thursday, Friday kids, keeping them apart. But since they're all in now, and it seems to have worked fine, we may be able to bring the Wednesdays back at elementary. At the middle school, like I said, we'd probably go to 4 days before we bring Wednesdays back. At the high school, it's possible that we would look at Wednesdays before we went to the 4 days. And the reason for that is that you could increase in-person time by 10% if you just went with a rotating use of Wednesdays, right? So the first week one, the Monday, Tuesdays would come in Wednesdays. Week two, the Thursday, Fridays would come in Wednesdays. And you could stagger it like that. And but I'm not as clueless as you might think as an old guy. I do know that the kids and the teachers are using Wednesdays, hopefully for a good purpose, with the extra help. And and in fact, I know because I have some of your classmates. I think they're sophomores who are on my sustainability task force, and we try to set up meetings during the week. And uh, just yesterday we had one, and a couple kids couldn't come because they were going to extra help. So they're using that time that used to be there after school. If you know if the teachers were fully vaccinated, and we're working on that, maybe you guys don't know that, but we are absolutely working on that. We have a good relationship with a company uh, called AFC, and they are they are who we send our staff or students to if they need a coronavirus test, like a COVID test instantly, a PCR test, which is the 99% accurate test. If we have somebody who's symptomatic, we have 5 slots available for our whole school system, and we can send a person over right away to Waltham. They'll get the test and they'll get the results within an hour or two. That's hugely important, right? You don't want to be waiting around 2 days to find out if you were infectious. And it turns out, yeah, you were. Now everybody you came into contact with is exposed too. So it's a quick turnaround, and we have that relationship with AFC. And AFC, we're going to work with on vaccinations for our teachers. So if our teachers were vaccinated, it doesn't get us all the way there, right? Our kids are not, and our kids can't be unless they're 16 or over, but they're not eligible until probably this summer, maybe even fall. So we have to, we have to factor that in too. But if our teachers were vaccinated, and we know that the masks and the social distancing is working, could we do either Wednesdays or 4 days? And um, here's the problem. That school's tight, right? We've got one lunch, one cafeteria. We share it with the middle school. The spaces are tight, right? Kids are eating. When you guys have lunch, I see kids, in the lobbies, they're spilling out all over the place. If we filled up the school, would they be able to stay, technically we're trying to keep you guys 5.5 feet away from each other. That's our commitment. I know that it doesn't always hold true, and sometimes it breaks down. But if we doubled the number of kids in the school, what are the chances that we'd really be rubbing up against each other, right? You'd have to be careful your passing times work right, and so there's a lot of challenges there. Go ahead, Laurie.
Yeah, I think another thing that one of my classes was talking about, if the whole school was in person at the same time, that would be a big challenge, is that the Wi-Fi has been impossible. I know in one of my classes this week, we couldn't even do class because the Wi-Fi just was not working at all. And we were all talking together as a class how if the entire school was in person at once and everyone was doing everything online, I don't really know how much we would even be able to get done. Alex, you were in that class, right? Yeah, it was the worst I've ever seen it. And I think it's just because since teachers are trying to limit like handing papers back and forth and everything has been online, and it would be really hard to do that with everyone in person.
Hmm. Well, that's a good point. And so what we say to people is that we have logistical challenges, right? So in other words, it's not so much that we're concerned about, it's not like we're opposed to it, but we have logistical challenges, and that would be one of them. Could we do it with our Wi-Fi? Now, that said, what's gobbling up all the bandwidth is the live streaming, right? Stuff like this. This consumes it. And I have the same problem at the central office. So, I mean, all of a sudden my whole screen will freeze. I'm sure you guys have this. The whole screen freezes, and it's like, uh, it's so frustrating. And for teachers, it's almost impossible. It's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? A song and dance? How do I entertain these guys? Like, I had a whole plan laid out, and if the technology doesn't work, it's a disaster. So I know that that's a legit concern, and I'm glad you mentioned it to me, because I want to double down on that and make sure that if we're even considering coming back for more in person, that we have answers or solutions to that problem. And you know, it's like anything, you hear, oh yeah, 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 we're on top of it. It'll be all set, and then it doesn't always kind of pan out that way. And it's not because our technology people are not trying. I just think sometimes we underestimate how much demand there is in our school between phones and between computers. It's a lot. And so, but here's the thing: would we need as much if everyone's in person? I mean, I think what we've gotten accustomed to, and I'm not sure it's a bad thing at all, is that we've learned now how to have conversations electronically, how to pass things along electronically, how to share our screens. It's all pretty cool. I mean, that's pretty awesome. In fact, in terms of like that my sustainability task force, think about how much paper we've probably saved. That's pretty awesome. I'm psyched about that because we waste a lot. And this has forced us to be, more electronically minded. So there's good and bad, but that's a really good point, Laurie. I'm glad you brought that up because we are talking about these things. I don't see us making a move. I used to think we were going to do it at the semester mark, which is what, today, tomorrow, this week, or Monday. Uh, so but I do think we're talking about once people got vaccinated, if teachers were vaccinated within the next month, could we start having those closer conversations? Because there are people out there who feel like their kids need to be in person, really, really need to be in person. And that's a kind of another question that I have for you guys. And just give me the straight scoop. Do you think that this has been harder on kids emotionally, or is being in school kind of with everyone and all those social experiences harder? Because what I've heard is that kids are having emotional breakdowns, and this is like a mental health crisis for kids. What do you think about that? Because I'm not convinced of that. I think kids are getting more sleep. I feel like they're more rested, and they've got these Wednesdays to balance their time. So I'm curious what you think about that.
I think a lot of it depends on the kid. I know I have some friends who find it impossible to be learning at home, and that makes everything a lot harder and stressful, and they like to be in that learning environment.
Hmm.
But personally, I found this really helpful. I think it's a lot easier to be at home. I mean, you just go to your desk, do it, you get to sleep in later. Having the Wednesdays to get that extra help, work on homework, whatever you have to do, meet with teachers. I found this to be a lot easier. Um, but I don't know if that's just me. I just really liked this setup.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on the individual, right? What do you think, Alex?
While I do really appreciate the extra sleeping, that's great. I do have some friends who really do struggle with this kind of thing, and there have been some difficult conversations, um, basically around the hybrid program, just because it's stressful and it's not what they're used to, and it's exponentially more difficult. So it's definitely there's a lot more mental health problems you see this year than any other year.
Hmm. Yeah, well, uh, it's interesting. I had the conversation with Miss Shagnon, and she said she asked her counselors, and the sense was that it hasn't been dramatically different. I mean, mental health issues aren't going away for teenagers. It's a hard time in life. It's I always say to people after doing this as long as I have, it's really about kids trying to figure out where they're going to fit in the universe, and that's stressful. It's like if you've got social challenges, it's stressful, it's super stressful. Like I've spoken to some kids who are just really not into the social scene, and they love it because they don't have to walk the halls, they don't have to be in those awkward situations in the lunchroom or whatever. And other kids are like, yeah, well, I happen to love those experiences and I need them, and without them, I'm miserable. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I think that's what people would tell us, and you guys are basically saying the same thing. Okay, what else? What else do you have?
All right. Are we planning on having mid years in the future, or was eliminating them only for this year? And has the school made any decisions about whether we will have finals or not this year? So that's sort of two
Whether
questions.
you will what?
Has the school decided whether or not we're going to have finals this year?
Um, so these are really big questions for Mr. Smith in terms of the finals. That's a question for him. Uh, Interesting. So I wrote to Mr. Smith because I couldn't remember. I had a conversation with him and I asked him, and the midterms are gone for this year for sure. The finals I don't know about because I didn't ask him that question. Uh, but the his academic standards, which is essentially the leadership team of the school, the department heads, are going to be discussing the future of midterms at their next meeting. So they're they're still batting that around. I will tell you this: there are school systems that we would consider kind of like communities, like for example Wellesley. When I was the principal in Wellesley, they did away with midterms there. They never went back. They just they didn't say we didn't say you couldn't have any kind of assessment. We just said we're not doing this whole kind of 90-minute or 2-hour mid-year examination block period schedule. We basically said if you want kind of a summative assessment for the semester, that's fine, you can do it, but do it in your your single period class, or make it a written document or something like that. And I think that's what you guys did this year. Is that right? You still could have kind of end of semester assessments. You just didn't have the mid-year exam period like you used to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know. None of my teachers have chosen to give us any sort of semester one test, but I think there's some like upperclassmen teachers who have decided to give one, but yeah, not the whole mid-years week.
I think
I mean, one of the things that I go ahead, Alex.
I think it's mostly the AP classes doing the semester tests. And
I gotcha. One of the things that I struggle with is that, and I'm speaking now as a former principal. What's the point of high school? The point is to get, especially in a place like Dover Sherburne, where a significant uh, segment of the population is going to go on to college. If that's the case, then we should be prepping them for the college experience. The college experience, you don't take full year courses in college, so you don't have a full year assessment. So the fact that we have finals that measure from September to June, to me always seemed like kind of extreme. I mean, semester exams I can see, and or assessments, and that's what you'll see in college. I guarantee it. You'll see at the end of your course, you have a paper due. It's usually papers, but in some subjects it's definitely a test. More of the math and sciences more likely be a test, and or a demonstration of your understanding of the material. I'm more into that. I would prefer that kids be able to demonstrate their understanding of the material, and not necessarily just on a pen and paper test. But I'm glad that academic standards is going to bang this thing around, uh, and hopefully come up with something that works for DS. What do you guys think? What do you think about the exams, and a place for exams in your lives? Is it important? Should they be eliminated? Should they be, allowed in some form? What do you think?
it's a difficult decision to make simply because there's a lot of stress surrounding there's a lot of stigma surrounding the idea of midterms and finals just because the stress that is built up around that time. However, taking them out completely would probably be a detriment just because there are going to be big tests in our future that's going to happen. So I would rather know how to handle the situation than be thrown into my SAT with no prior knowledge whatsoever of how to take a test.
Hmm.
It's a difficult decision, but I think if we found like a compromise would be best.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah,
think?
we didn't have finals last year. So our grade has never gone through finals.
Hmm.
So I'm not really sure how different that is to mid-years, how much longer the prep would take, anything like that. Um, yeah, I know mid-years, I mean, no one loves them, they're not fun, but I think the school does a good job of letting you, once you take your tests, you can go home early, you have all day to study. And I think the school does a good job on making it the best it can be for being mid-years. So mid-years honestly I didn't think it was that bad last year, but I can't really say about finals. I'm not really sure.
Mhm. I guess again, it sort of depends on the individual, right? What we do know about Dover Sherburne, and it hasn't changed since I was a kid at DS, is that it's a pretty competitive atmosphere, and we're so small that everybody kind of knows each other's business. So we know if you're a CP student, we know if you're an honors student, we know if you're an AP student, and I'm talking about we as in students, student to student. And I think what sometimes happens, this is what I used to see in Wellesley, is that the kids would get themselves worked up, right? They'd say, for example, how much studying did you do last night? Oh my God, I was up until 2 in the morning. Oh my God, you were up until, she was up until 2 in the morning, and maybe I should stay up until 3 in the morning. And this just kind of gets this whole kind of atmosphere going. It's a little crazy. And that is something that worries me. I think if we're having honest conversations with the teachers and the kids and emphasizing that it's not the end of the world, because I can tell you, who I was when I left high school, what my grades looked like, what the courses I took were, was flat out comical. I mean, I wasn't in a good place and I wasn't taking things seriously. But I eventually grew up. So I think sometimes kids get too hyper focused on, oh my God, I have to have all A's. I mean, I understand it. I understand the competitive nature and the world's only getting more competitive. But I also think it's super important for us to put things in perspective for kids. And so I'm glad they're having the conversation. We'll see how it goes.
Right. So we just have two last questions here.
Okay, we better hustle, right? We have about 5 more minutes.
Yeah. This one is, we recently got emails about our opinion of weighted GPAs. Is that something that the school has been talking about getting rid of?
Yeah, I know that it's interesting. Somebody wrote to me, perhaps one of your classmates, I think she's a sophomore, wrote to me, and it was, she made a bunch of really compelling points. I will just say this about GPA. Believe me, there are arguments on both sides of why it should go or stay. Uh, and it's one of those things, kind of like the start times decision. When we made that start times decision, I knew darn well that at least half the people liked the idea and the other half didn't. And that's exactly how it kind of shook out. It's maybe a little more than half, but it was were in favor of it. But it was close. And I think people feel the same way about GPA. If you're a top tier student, well, why would you want to get rid of GPA? It's a great thing and you can brag about your high GPA. But if you're a student who struggles, more of a CP student, um, your GPA is going to be awful. And because no matter how hard you work, you're not going to be able to keep up. You don't get the same amount of credit as the kids taking the honors and APs. So it's just like one of those debates that I don't think there's going to be a rock solid answer to, that everyone's going to say, oh, this is a no-brainer, let's do it. But I do think it's worth looking at, and I do think it's interesting when you do the research and you see who has gotten rid of GPA, and you look at whether or not it's impacted those kids' acceptances. It's fascinating. And so um, I feel grateful that I'm not the principal, because that's a really, really hefty conversation, and people feel really passionate about it. It will ultimately be a school committee decision, though, because it goes in the program of studies, and the program of studies is approved every year by the school committee. So we're a long way from that happening, but I know that definitely Mr. Smith and his school council and probably academic standards are having conversations about it. So there's a lot of buzz around it. I don't think that decision's been made.
All right, and on to the last question. Since this is your last year with us at DS, what were your favorite aspects of working at DS, and what do you hope to see in Dover Children's future?
Yeah, I mean, I find myself reflecting a lot about that. I think my favorite aspect of it is that this is home for me. I've worked in a lot of different places. This is my home, and trust me, I didn't always love Dover Sherburne. There were times in my life when I really didn't like it, because the smallness and the affluence. There were things just so non-diverse. There were things I really didn't like about Dover Sherburne, and honestly, people that I didn't like in Dover and Sherburne. But I've come to the conclusion that this is my home and these are my people. And it's been really nice to be able to serve my town for a change. Instead of serving somebody else's kids, how about serving my kids, my town, my cousin's kids? Uh, and how about being the person in charge of the spending in the schools? Because that spending affects my mother who lives in town and my aunt and uncle who live in town. Like, it's been really cool to be able to just to be here and to say, for example, because I live in Sherburne, to drive along Farm Road and go buy salt and stalls in the morning. We always used to joke with I used to joke with my daughters about the cows in the mist. You see all those cows in the field, but it's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it's gorgeous. So I'm going to miss all that. I'm proud of the fact that we've tackled some big things together and that we're having conversations about things that, at least in my opinion, were not being discussed. For example, along those GPA lines, you know, schools that, communities with affluence, there always seems to be a kind of a us and them, the haves and the have-nots. And if you're in the have-nots, it's not a very pleasant experience. And I think we're having conversations about that kind of stuff. Like, what can we do to make sure everybody feels like they've got a place here, that there's no pecking order, and that it's not painful for kids to come to school because they're not smart or they're not good looking or they're awkward? What can we do to make sure that everybody feels like they're part of this place? And the hashtag WeAreDS may sound corny and hokey to you guys, but believe me, there was a method to that. And I was very much involved in doing that because I wanted to make sure that every single kid felt welcome in this school system. And I'm still pushing that. And it means a lot to me. And so that's something I'm really proud of. So I don't know if I answered all of your question. There's a lot of things that I'm proud of. If you look at the strategic plan for the system, we've really gone after a lot of things. And start times, for example, uh, the way we handled this pandemic, I'm super proud of that. I was the superintendent in my hometown, the school system. I'm the first superintendent who graduated from Dover Sherburne. And I was a C student at best. It's pretty cool. It's a made for TV story. So there you go. I'm psyched. I'm looking forward to the future. I think Dover Sherburne is in a great place, and I think it's just going to get better because we have so many smart, caring people, and you guys are lucky. Believe me, you're so blessed to be able to grow up here.
Yes, definitely. And I know that I've really enjoyed having you as our superintendent. I feel like you've done a lot to try to improve the school when it comes to mental health and things from the kids' perspective, which I know a lot of the time it's hard for the kids to feel like their opinion is being heard and in like big decisions. And I think that you've done a really awesome job with that. And we're super grateful. And thank you for coming on our show today.
Thanks, Laurie. That's a really, really nice thing to say.
If I might add, when I first got here in eighth grade, and that when the conversation about school start times was going on, and they sent out a survey about what the students felt about student start times, and my honest to God reaction was, "Wait, they actually care about what we think?" Did it, or just did what they wanted to do without any consideration for what the student body thought, and I think it's an incredible thing, and
Yeah.
Chester definitely has some large shoes to fill. Um, but yeah, like Lori said, that's about all the time we have for today. This is the final Keough's Corner episode you'll see with us on it because the semester's about to end. But it has been great. It's been super fun doing these with you. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself, and I'll see you around, I guess.
Thank you, guys. Very, very, very appreciative of those kind words, and uh, I look forward to hearing about your successes in life and happiness. Right? Not just achievement, but happiness. I hope you guys have you find happiness in life. It's hard. There's plenty of challenges in life, but I think you're going to do great things. And it's been awesome being part of this TV show. And I wish you the very best. Let's call it a wrap. Thanks very much.